A shy saddle maker waited by the rails. The bride who came wore a mourning veil. The bench was cold. I remember that. October early, the kind of morning that hasn't decided yet whether it wants to be winter, and I was sitting on the depot bench with my hat on my knee and my good shirt already pulling wrong at the collar because I'd buttoned it crooked in the dark. I'd been up since 4. The train wasn't due until 8:30. I sat there and I watched the sky go from black to gray to that flat, featureless white it gets before the sun actually commits to anything, and I turned my hat in my hands about 100 times and I thought, she is not coming. I'd thought it every morning for 3 weeks running, ever since the letter from the agency in St. Paul confirmed a date. Eleanor Marsh, widow, 34 years old, answered to your advertisement. The photograph they'd sent was small and the paper was soft with handling before it ever reached me. I don't know how many men had looked at it. A woman with dark hair, straight shoulders, a mouth set like she was thinking about something she hadn't made up her mind on yet. That was all I could tell. My name is Calvin Prout. I make saddles. I've made saddles my whole working life, started apprentice to my uncle outside of Vermilion when I was 14, set up my own shop in Granger when I was 26, and I have been in that shop more or less ever since. I am 51 years old. I am not a tall man. I have a scar on my left thumb from a stitching awl that slipped in the cold when I was 17, and I have hands that are never entirely clean no matter how long I scrub them, because the leather oil gets into the ridges of the skin and stays. I know that about myself. I've known it a long time. I am not the kind of man women walk into a room. Granger had maybe 300 people when I arrived and had maybe 320 people now, 20-some-odd years later. I knew every face knew mine. Nobody in Granger thought poorly of me. I paid my debts. I did good work. I didn't drink mean or run my mouth. But there's a difference between a man being thought well of and a man being thought of at all. And I had learned that difference slowly, the way you learn things you'd rather not have to. I'd had one chance at marriage years back. Woman named Dora Tilghman, daughter of the mill owner. She was kind to me, kinder than she needed to be, and I thought maybe that meant something. It didn't. She married a land agent from Sioux Falls who could put 3 sentences together without going quiet in the middle. I stood at the edge of the reception, and I held a glass of cider, and I watched her laugh at something he said. And I walked home in the dark, and I went to bed, and I got up the next morning, and I oiled my tools, and that was that. So, 51 years old, a bench outside a train depot, turning my hat in my hands. I almost didn't put in the advertisement. My neighbor Gus Holter had done it 2 years before, and it hadn't come to anything, and he'd taken considerable ribbing from the men at the feed store, and I was not a man who could absorb ribbing easily. I don't have the kind of face that lets things roll off. But the winter before last had been long and very quiet. Too quiet. I'd started talking to my tools. Not out of loneliness exactly, or not only that, more out of a feeling I can't quite name, a feeling like something was running out. I put the advertisement in because I was 50 years old and I had a warm house and a real trade and no one to leave it to. And I am not a man who can let a thing just run out without trying. I wrote the advertisement 11 times before I sent one. Saddle maker in Dakota Territory, 50 years old, steady income, house on 2 lots, no debt, seeks wife. Not a handsome man, not a talker, good with my hands and my word. I would be faithful and I would provide. I would like someone to sit across a table from. That last line I put in and then took out and then put back in 3 times. It seemed like too much. It also seemed true. I sent it. The agency wrote back inside a month. They had 3 women who'd answered. They sent photographs and short letters. One was 17 and I put hers aside immediately. One was a school teacher who listed in her letter the qualities she required in a husband, 7 qualities, numbered, and the list was not unkind, but it made me tired in a specific way. The third was Eleanor Marsh. Her letter was short. She said she was 34. She said her husband Garrett had died the spring before of a lung complaint after 2 years of illness. She said she had no children. She said she wasn't looking for love. She said that directly, which I respected. She was looking for stability and a man she could trust to be what he said he was. I read that last part twice. A man she could trust to be what he said he was. I wrote back the same evening. The train came in 7 minutes late, which felt appropriate. I stood up when I heard it, and then I didn't know what to do with my hands, so I put my hat on and then took it off again and held it. 5 people got off. A couple I didn't know. A drummer with a sample case. An old man who was met by someone I recognized, the blacksmith's father-in-law visiting from Yankton. And then, last off the car, stepping down from the iron step with one hand on the rail and a traveling bag in the other. She was wearing black, all black dress and coat, and a small hat with a short veil pushed back from her face. Mourning clothes, real ones, not the fashionable kind, the kind a woman still actually in mourning wears. Her hair was dark and pulled back plain. She stood on the platform and looked around without any expression I could read, and then she looked at me. I must have been the only man standing alone, holding a hat. She came toward me and I stood still, and when she was about 10 feet away she stopped and she looked at me with a kind of directness that I was not prepared for. Not hard, just direct, like she was reading something she needed to get right. "Mr. Prude." "Yes, ma'am, Calvin." She nodded once. She did not smile. "Eleanor Marsh." "I know," I said, and then felt like a fool for saying it. "I mean from the photograph." "You look like your letter," she said. I didn't know what that meant. I still don't fully. I said, "I have a wagon if you're ready." She was ready. She had one bag. The ride from the depot to town was 2 miles, and we didn't talk much. I told her the names of the 2 families whose spreads we passed, and I told her the name of the river, and she looked at the country around her in that same focused, quiet way she'd looked at me, like she was taking inventory of something. The grass was brown, and the sky was that hard Dakota blue that only comes when the temperature is dropping. She sat with the bag on her lap and her hands folded over it. I had prepared a lot of things to say. I had practiced them. They all seemed wrong now. After a while she said, "How long have you been in Granger?" 23 years. She thought about that. "You like it?" It wasn't a question exactly. I said, "I know it. That's mostly the same thing." She looked at me then, a quick look, then back at the road. I'd arranged for her to stay with Gus Holter's wife, Martha, until we decided things. That had seemed right to me, to give her a place that was hers, not mine, while she found her feet. I told her that when we pulled up to the Holter place, and she listened to me explain it, and when I was done she said, "That was considerate." She said it like she'd noted it in a ledger. I brought her bag in and I left. Martha Holter told me the next morning that Eleanor Marsh had eaten a full supper and slept until 7 and seemed, in Martha's words, like a woman who had been carrying something very heavy for a long time and was not yet sure it was safe to put it down. I understood that. I didn't push. I had the shop. I had work. I'd taken on a contract for a ranch outside of Millersburg that wanted 12 new saddles before the spring drives, and I was 3 weeks into a 4-month job, and there was enough in that to fill my days without borrowing trouble. She came by the shop on the 3rd day. I heard the door open and I thought it was Tom Weir coming back about his repair, and I didn't look up from the saddle tree I was blocking. Then I didn't hear Tom's voice and I looked up. She was standing just inside the door, still in the black, though I would later learn she had 2 dresses with her, both black, but one was lighter wool for indoors. She was looking at the work on the bench, not at me, at the saddle. I waited. She walked over to the bench and looked at the saddle tree, and then she reached out and ran her fingers along the cantle curve I'd been shaping. Slow, like she was reading it. "My husband had a saddle like this," she said. "The back curve, he liked a high cantle." I didn't say anything. He was a good horseman, she said, then nothing for a moment. He was sick for a long time. I know, your letter said. She took her hand back. Can I watch? I won't be in the way. She sat in the chair I keep in the corner for customers, and she watched me work for the better part of an hour. She didn't make small talk. Neither did I. She asked 2 questions the whole time, one about how I chose the leather weight, one about the difference between a roping saddle and a stock saddle, and both were real questions, the kind that come from actual wanting to know, not from filling silence. I answered them straight. She listened. When she left, she said, "Same time tomorrow." I said yes. She came every morning for 2 weeks. I learned things the way you learn things when you're working with your hands, and someone is sitting quiet nearby, in pieces, out of order, when the thing she was thinking found its way out. Her husband Garrett had been a grain merchant in St. Paul. They'd been married 7 years. The illness took a long time and cost everything, the business first, then the house, and by the end she had been nursing him and managing what was left of the money and doing it alone because his family was far and hers was gone. She'd sent the advertisement answer 3 months after he died. Not from grief, she said, or not mainly. From arithmetic. She said the word, arithmetic like it, was something she'd made peace with. I did not say, "I think you are something more than arithmetic." I thought it. I turned a piece of latigo over in my hands and I thought it, and I did not say it, because it wasn't my place, and because she hadn't asked, and because I am a man who has learned, slowly and at some cost, not to say the things that are only true for me. What I said was, that took nerve. She looked at me. Selling up, starting over from nothing, that's not arithmetic, that's nerve. She was quiet for a long time, then, Garrett would have said the same thing. She paused. He was a good man, just not a well one for a long time. I nodded. "I'm not in love with you," she said. "I want to say that plainly. I don't think that's what either of us is here for." "No," I said, "I know that." "I could be a good wife," she said. "I know how to run a household. I know how to work. I'm not looking to be taken care of." "I know." She looked at me again that direct way. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" She thought about it honestly, which I had come to understand was how she did everything. "Someone lonelier," she said finally. "Someone who would need more from me." I didn't know what to do with that. I turned back to the leather. We were married 6 weeks after she arrived, on a Thursday, in the front parlor of Reverend Cade's house, with Martha Holter and Gus as witnesses. Alina wore a dark blue dress she'd bought the week before from the dry goods store, the first thing she'd bought that wasn't black, and she stood next to me with her shoulders straight and her hands still. And when Reverend Cade asked the words, she said them in a clear, unhurried voice, like she'd decided something and was finished deciding it. Afterward, Martha cried a little and hugged her. Alina patted Martha's back with a careful hand, like she was reminding herself how. I drove us home in the dark. It was colder now, November, real cold, and she sat beside me on the wagon bench, and I could see her breath in the lamplight from the depot we passed. When we got to the house, I lit the lamps while she stood in the front room and looked at it. I'd cleaned it within an inch of its life the day before. She walked slowly around, looking at things, the work table, the bookshelf with its 12 books, the photograph of my mother and uncle on the wall. "It's a good house," she said. "It keeps the cold out." She turned and looked at me. "That's not nothing." "No." We ate the supper I'd prepared, a good beef stew, because I'd been cooking for myself for 20 years and I'd gotten decent at it, and we sat across the table from each other, and I thought, this is the thing I wrote in the advertisement and took out and put back in. I would like someone to sit across a table from. Here was the thing itself. Here was the woman. Here was the table. She ate 2 full bowls of the stew and said it was good, and I believed her because she said it plain, without the little upswing some people put on things to be polite. The winter came on hard. That was the winter of the big snows, if you remember those years, snow by the middle of November, and it didn't let up much until March. The drifts against the north wall of the shop came up past the lower window by December. I had the contract work to keep me busy and Alina had the house, and slowly, without any ceremony, she took hold of it the way she'd said she would. She was not an easy woman early on. Not cold, she was never cold but contained like water in a bucket. She did not give herself away. She did not volunteer feeling. I learned to read her through other things. The way she went quiet when something was wrong, the way she held her coffee cup when she was thinking, the set of her shoulders when she was tired. There was one evening in December where I came in from the shop later than usual. I'd been fighting a piece of skirting leather that wouldn't conform to the tree, and I'd stayed past dark trying to make it right. And I came through the door, and the house was warm and there was light from the kitchen and something on the stove. And she came to the kitchen doorway and looked at me. And she had a towel over her shoulder and flour on her hands, and she said, "You look like the leather one." I laughed. It came out of me before I knew it was coming, a real laugh, sudden and full. And I stood there in the doorway with my coat on, and she looked at me with the nearest thing to surprise I'd ever seen on her face. And then something in her expression went quiet and careful, like she was seeing something she hadn't expected. I said it did mostly. She said, "Supper's in 10 minutes." That was all, but that look stayed with me. January was the hardest. A 2-day blizzard laid 3 feet of new snow on top of what was already there, and the temperature dropped to where the nails in the siding talked at night, that popping, cracking sound. And I killed the mornings cutting wood and banking the barn and checking on Gus and Martha, who were 300 yards away, and could have been 3 miles for all the good the distance would do in a real emergency. Alina did not complain. She did not pretend it was something other than what it was, either. She did the work, kept the fires, kept the food, kept the house without fuss and without theater. And when I came in from outside with ice on my beard, she would have coffee waiting without my having to ask, and I would sit at the kitchen table and drink it and watch the fire. And after a while she would sit across from me, and we would not always talk, and it was not uncomfortable. One night in the worst of it, she asked me about the scar on my thumb. I told her, the all slipping, the cold shop in Vermilion, my uncle cursing and wrapping it in a strip of his shirt because we were out of proper cloth, and then working the rest of the afternoon with it wrapped up because neither of us thought to stop. She took my hand and looked at the scar, not in a tender way, in an examining way, the way she looked at everything, and she ran her thumb across it once. "Your uncle sounds like a serious man," she said. "He was. He taught me everything I know, and he never once said he was proud of me." She looked up from my hand. "Did you know he was?" "Yeah," I said. "I knew it." She nodded and let my hand go. We sat, the fire talked. "My father was like that," she said after a while. "He didn't say things, but I knew." That was the most she'd ever told me about her people. I didn't push for more. I folded it up and kept it. February came, and I had a bad week. The ranch outside of Millersburg sent a letter saying they were cutting the saddle contract from 12 to 7, money trouble, they said. And I believed them because everybody had money trouble that year. And it set me back enough that I spent 2 nights with the account books trying to make the arithmetic work. And it worked barely, but the barely was the thing. I'd been counting on the full contract to have the shop's roof redecked in the spring. Now that was gone. I didn't tell Alina. I didn't think it was her trouble to carry. She found out anyway. She found the letter. I'd left it on the work table in the shop when she came by that morning, and she read it. And when she came into the workshop from the corner where she usually sat, she held it out to me and said, "What does this do to the spring?" "Puts the roof off another year." "That's all. That's all." She stood there with the letter and she looked at me. "You weren't going to tell me." "It's a shop problem." "We're married," she said, not angry, just stating it. I said, "I know that." "I have some money," she said. "Not much. I've been keeping it separate because it was mine before and it seemed right, but I have some, enough for the roof. Eleanor, let me finish. I'm not offering it because you need rescuing. I'm offering it because the roof needs doing and I have money, and it would be foolish not to use it and we are married. That's all. I looked at her. Don't make it something it's not, she said. All right. She put the letter on the bench. Put it in the account and let's not talk about it anymore. We didn't. But I thought about it for a long time, not the money, the way she'd said we are married asterisk. Like it was a real thing she'd taken hold of. Like it was hers. Spring came late, but it came. The snow went off in pieces, stubborn at the north-facing slopes, quick on the flats, and by the middle of April there was mud and then grass, and then the long Dakota sky opening up the way it does when you've been under a low lid for months. I had the roof done by the 1st of May. Eleanor planted a garden along the south wall of the house, not a showy garden, a practical one, the kind that feeds you, vegetables and a few herbs, and I built her a proper cold frame out of old window glass and scrap lumber, and she looked at it for a long moment when I was done and said, "That's well made," and went back to her planting. Something had shifted over the winter, but it had shifted the way ground shifts under a slow freeze and thaw. You don't notice the movement, you notice the result. She laughed more. Not often, but more. She started leaving books on my side of the table. She was a reader, had been a reader her whole life. She told me once, the one thing poverty and illness hadn't taken, and she would fold down the corners of pages she thought I should read, and when I asked her about them she would talk, really talk, with opinions and an edge to them and a willingness to be wrong that I found more than anything else about her to be the most striking thing. She had a will, not a hard will, not a mean one, a real one. She thought her own thoughts and kept her own counsel and didn't look to me to tell her what to feel. I'd thought once that I wanted a woman who would be soft toward me. I found that what I actually wanted was a woman who was real, and there is a difference. She was real. She was difficult in the way real things are difficult. I valued it. There is one evening I keep. It was late June, warm enough to sit outside after supper, and we did that sometimes now. Took the 2 chairs out from the kitchen and sat on the south side of the house where the garden was, watching the light go down. This particular evening there was a low cloud bank in the west and the light was coming under it. That long orange June light that turns everything gold and slightly unreal. And Eleanor had her coffee and her book and I had nothing, just the evening, just the quiet. She wasn't reading. She had the book open on her knee, but she wasn't looking at it. After a while she said, "Do you know what I thought when I got off the train?" "No." "I thought there he is. And I thought that's a careful man." She paused. "I didn't mean it as a compliment then." "What did you mean it as?" "I meant it as he won't demand things. He'll give me room." She was quiet. That was what I needed most, to not be demanded at, to not have to perform being happy or being a good wife or being recovered. I waited. What I didn't expect, she said, was that careful was also capable, that it was the same thing. The light was going gold red now. Swallows were working the air above the garden. "I notice things," she said. "It's my curse, I think. I notice what men do and don't do, and most of it I could do without noticing, but you," she stopped, started again. "The cold frame. The way you explained the route to town when I first arrived, all the landmarks so I'd know it myself. The way you didn't ask about Garrett." She looked over at me. "You are not a man who does things for credit." I didn't say anything. "That's rare," she said. "That's rarer than you know." She reached across the space between the chairs, and she put her hand on my arm, not squeezing, just placing it there, her hand on my forearm, easy as setting a book on a shelf. She looked back out at the light. I looked down at her hand. "I have built saddles for 30 years. I have spent my working life with my hands, and I know the weight and feel of things, the way good leather settles, the way a well-set rivet doesn't give, The way a thing made right has a quality in the hand that a thing made poorly never does. I know how things feel when they're right. That was how that felt. We sat there until the light was gone and the first stars were out over the flats, and she didn't take her hand away and I didn't move, and the coffee went cold in her cup, and the garden went dark and the swallows quit, and it was a night in late June in Dakota, and I was 51 years old, and that was what my life had come to, and I would not have traded it for anything I can think of. There are things I know now that I did not know then. I know that a good woman choosing a man she had no reason to trust is the most serious thing a woman can do. I know that a leaner had been gutted by 7 years of watching someone she loved disappear by inches, and that she had kept herself together through it by putting herself behind glass, keeping herself at a little distance from everything so the everything couldn't reach in and take more of her. I know that what she was doing, sitting in my shop every morning watching me work, asking about leather weights and saddle trees, was not idleness. She was watching to see if I was what I said I was. She was deciding slowly, the way she decided everything, whether it was safe. I know that the day she put her money in the account and said, "We are married," was the day she decided. I know that I did not earn her by being dashing or by fighting someone or by saving her from a burning building. I earned her, if earned is even the right word, by being, over the long dark months of a Dakota winter, the same man she'd seen in the advertisement. By not turning into something else when she wasn't looking. By being what I said I was. That seems like a small thing. I've learned it isn't. We have been married 9 years now. The shop is bigger. I took on an apprentice 4 years back, a boy from the Holter farm with good hands and a capacity for quiet that suits the work. Eleanor's garden covers the whole south wall now and half the east one, and she trades preserves with Martha Holter and 2 other women in town, and she reads every book she can get her hands on, and she has opinions about all of them. She still doesn't say things easily, but I know her now. I know the particular silence that means she is pleased, and the particular silence that means she is not, and the particular silence that means she is in her own thoughts and doesn't need company, and I know the difference between all three. That took years, and it was worth the time. There are mornings I come in from the shop for the midday meal, and she is at the kitchen table with her book and her coffee, and she looks up when the door opens, and there is something in that look, not grand, not performed, just the plain acknowledgement of a woman who sees who came through the door and is not sorry. That gets me every time. I do not understand entirely why she chose to stay. I mean, I understand the arithmetic, but I also think there was something more than arithmetic, and I think she knows it too, and we have never talked about it directly because we are both people who live more in the doing than the saying. What I know is that she sees me, not the idea of me, not what she needed me to be, me. The man with the oil-stained hands and the 12 books and the shop that smells like leather and neatsfoot, and the thing I've been building quietly all my life, which is a life with some dignity in it, a life that does what it says it will. She sees that. She saw it when no one else was looking. I think about the bench at the depot sometimes, the cold morning, the hat in my hands, the 7 minutes I waited after the train was supposed to come, thinking, she is not coming. She came. She was wearing mourning for a good man she'd lost, and she came anyway, and she sat in my corner chair and asked real questions about leather weights, and she was not soft and she was not easy, and she is the best thing in my life. I do not know what I looked like to her, getting off that bench and walking toward her. I know what she looked like to me. She looked like a woman who had come a long way and intended to make something of it. She has.